All right, so let's pick back up where we left off. We were starting the examination of the relational leadership model that the text is focusing on in terms of the model that we are looking at. We're going to look at the other models as well, but this is just an introduction into the overall model that we're going to be looking at. So it leans heavily on psychology, sociology, and educational framework. And it starts as the basic requirements would be first off, learning more about yourself, your true self, and self awareness in the context of others, meaning how others see you, and understanding your own personal values and commitments. So, in essence, what we're looking at there is your own ethical values. You need to, or the model requires that we have to set this up as the base level, which is one of the reasons why, for example, you have a self-analysis to do. There's a chapter on learning about yourself, on understanding self, understanding others, and there are chapters also on examining ethical belief structures and ethical values that that exist. The requirement, of course, we spoke about the self-awareness, effective listening, collaboration, compromise, and putting all of those things into practice. Now, of these five items here, one of the most misunderstood is effective listening. So let's talk about that a little bit out of the five elements that we talk about here. What do we conceive or think of as being effective listening? Let me ask Ms. Sanchez if she's able to answer. What do you perceive effective listening to be? Ms. Sanchez? No? How about Mr. McSween? No?
Sir, can you repeat the question for me, please?
I want to know, what do you think effective listening is? Jadu, go ahead.
Um,
Sorry, go ahead, go ahead. You go ahead.
I think it's when you listen to understand.
All right, okay. But what are you going to understand? This is Miss Augustine. Miss Augustine. My bad, Augustine.
To understand whatever the message is
Uh-huh.
that is being relayed.
Okay, cool. All right, Stefan, I see your hand up. What do you think? And your mic is open.
I was gonna add to what she just said.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is listening to be understood,
All
but
right.
making sure you clearly understand the person's perspective of what they're saying before you answer to them, to their response, before you respond to them.
All right. Okay. What about Aaliyah Bartley? I see your hand is up as well.
Well, I was stating as effective listening will be you listen, you understand, and then you learn from whatever it is that they're trying to explain to you.
Okay. All right. How easy is this? Anybody?
You can repeat.
How easy do you think effective listening is?
It is so easy. I will put it as a four because it's something that takes time to actually learn. Because there are some people who are talkative and does not listen.
Uh huh. Okay. Mr. Jadu, do you think this that effective listening is going to be an easy process?
For me, yes.
Okay. So what is the first thing one needs to do to effectively listen?
They need to pay attention firstly to what has been said.
Okay, process wise. But what's more important than paying attention?
To being open minded.
What does that mean, Miss Williams? Stefan, it's okay if you don't have a response. Yeah, yeah, Miss Williams.
You could be listening to what somebody's saying. I could understand the information that is being that's being given to you, but you might not understand where the person coming from, or you
Uh
might
huh.
not. You can't put yourself in the person's shoes, so you would not effectively.
Understand them.
Yeah.
All right. And what does that require you to do then?
be open-minded about the information that's being given to you.
Right. So what does that imply in terms of us having to do things? Sydney.
So I think when it comes to the concept of open-mindedness, it could also mean acknowledging that everybody's views is different and somebody else's views may not align with your personal views, and
Hmm.
being able to just try to understand where they're coming from instead of being kind of apprehensive because it doesn't align with your personal beliefs.
Which means what? You're so close. You're so close. It's the most difficult thing to do with effective listening. It and you're hitting it all around the head, but you haven't hit it on the head just yet, at least in terms of expressing it.
So is it staying quiet?
Well, yes, being quiet, but it implies something else. It implies, as Ms. Ota was talking about, you actually have to suspend judgment because the way in which we judge people is based upon our own value system. So if we're listening to somebody and we are listening to them through the framework of our own belief structure and our own concepts and ideas, we are not effectively listening. We have to actually put aside judgment and listen for understanding. Even when they are speaking about things we are diametrically opposed to, and that's what makes effective listening difficult because we have to put aside our own personal values or personal feelings about the concept that we're discussing. Now, it's easy, relatively, to do so when we're discussing things that we're all in agreement about, but it's more difficult when we are discussing things that we have very strong opinions about, which is one of the reasons why a lot of discussion or discourse taking place in leadership positions suffers from the inability of people to put aside their own positions and really listen to what the other side has to say. Consider, for example, the argument of pro-life and pro-choice. Those are people who engage in it oftentimes fail to look at things from the perspective of other people because their own perspective doesn't allow them to, and they're unable to shut it off. And that creates a lot of conflict, which is why of the five things said, probably the most difficult one to put into practice is the ability to effectively listen. Because once we can do that and understand before we judge, and because we automatically begin to judge people, huh? From the time we look at somebody, we begin to assess them based upon what we think is correct, what we think is nice, what we think is attractive, what we like. That's how we start to do things. If you think about coming across somebody for the first time, one of the first things you do is you're going to assess that individual from what you like, what you feel, what you want. Turning that off is the most difficult thing that most of us will have to engage in. Listening for understanding requires that we shut down our own barriers to that communication. Um, it it it's easier with total strangers to do that, but it's harder with people with whom we have personal relationships with. It's one of the reasons why people in a relationship have problems effectively listening to each other, because we are connecting them to a set of emotional connections that we have with the individual, whether it is affection or whether it is simply dissatisfaction or whatever it is. We are unable to shut it down effectively enough to actually listen to what the other person has to say, and that is something that we as people, and for those of us who are seeking leadership positions or who are in leadership positions, need to practice. And it's not an easy thing to do. And that's why I identify it here in the list here as being some of the most important things to do. With that, if we are able to engage in truly effective listening, we're able to compromise and collaborate much easily. And for us to therefore effectively listen, we must be aware of our own barriers. All right. So if you're talking to somebody about abortion, for example, you have to know where you stand with it and be able to shut that down when you're talking to somebody who is diametrically opposed to you. So you might be pro choice, but you're talking to somebody who's pro life, and you just can't wrap yourself around why this person sees the need to that all life is sacred, and that all those things that come up in that discussion. And I'm using those types of discussions because it is important for us to understand that those discussions have emotive content to it because we connect with it in one way or the other, either from one end or the other, and that is going to create natural barriers in our ability to communicate with each other. So it's one of those things that we're going to have to pay attention to, dismantling our own barriers or internal systems of reference that we need to be paying attention to. Another set of foundation principles of this leadership model is that regardless of where we are in life, it concerns us all. This is one that is hard because when we are younger, we tend to look upon leadership decisions as being them people thing, old people thing. Um, and only as we start to get older, we start to make the connection that leadership is critical regardless of what age I'm at. Because where you are today has a lot to do with what the leaders around you did with you at this point in time. All right. We also need to understand that people will, at every point in time, view and value leadership differently. And we have to appreciate that. Again, effectively listening and effectively understanding that for some people, they will see leadership as being critical. For other people, they will see it as, them could do what they want kind of situation. Um, that leadership is a flexible or dynamic concept as opposed to it being static. This is something that we tend to have some problems with because we prefer to think of things in absolute terms and not in fluid terms, and that is problematic when we are looking at things. So it's important that we have that mindset that things are in a fluid state at all times. Um, Different types of settings call for different type of leadership thinking or leadership actions, and we're going to come across those things. And the last one, which is probably even more important, is the concept that leadership is something that can be learned and developed. It is not something that is inherent and born in us. All right, it's not a genetic construct. It is something that can be learned and developed because far too often people perceive others as being natural born leaders. That is a misconception that we're going to be having to pay attention to. For us to be able to achieve the levels of leadership and ethical valuing that we're going to be trying to approach here, it requires us committing to high ethical standards, to encourage change, which is a difficult thing in itself, and social responsibility. Along with that, we have to develop the critical thinking skills necessary, which is something that is important. We have to pay attention to our credibility and those around us, how authentic the individual is, because that level of credibility and authenticity affects our integrity and is seen through our behavior, which is ethical conduct. So critical thinking is difficult because our education system does not really support critical thinking. Most times, I don't know if any of you all have ever encountered this, but the minute you begin to question what's taking place in a classroom setting, your lecturer or teacher is likely to tell you to shut up and listen. Especially in the primary and secondary school systems, it's a situation where you are told to stay quiet and absorb all of this, and then suddenly you'll start to come into the sixth form environment or the tertiary level environment, and they start talking about the need for critical thinking. Another one that is also squashed early on is creativity. Um, this is because the critical thinking means questioning things around us. And unfortunately, most teachers are not equipped to handle students who are critical thinkers. Primarily because in a lot of instances, we can't, our inquisitiveness is, is annoying to other people. Think about a child who's always asking you a question: why this, why that, why this, why do we do this, why do we? That's critical thinking. It's the natural inquiry to find out, well, why is this happening, why are we doing this, why shouldn't I do this, why can't I do that? And that question why is part of the critical thinking. But look what happens when children consistently or constantly ask why. What do we do? Ms. Bartlett, what do you do when your child is always asking why, and you get to the point where you're frustrated as hell, and you just say, "Because I said so." You ever did that, Ms. Bartley, or anybody who else who has children here or interacts with children on a regular basis?
Could you repeat the question?
Well, I'm asking the context of, have you ever run into the frustration of a child asking why all the time, and you either stop answering them or you start to give them glib answers, or tell them, listen, the reason why we're not doing this is because I said so, and I'm the boss and I'm in charge. Have,
Um, when it comes to that, when it comes to that, I have a questionable daughter.
uh-huh,
So eventually, when I can't take it no more, I just watch her
right,
for like a
and
good 2 minutes before I answer her again. Yeah.
right, and you see what's happening there is that the natural critical thinking of the child is being frowned upon as something that is not good. So that the behavior modification is that now pretty soon the child is going to stop asking those questions because they know it upsets mommy, and that extends itself into the education system, because the entire education system is not designed to encourage critical thinking. It encourages you to shut up and listen. So to suddenly say to somebody, you need to develop critical thinking skills, is a mistake, because critical thinking skills have always existed, but they were pushed aside and subdued throughout years of indoctrination in the education system. Similarly, creativity, because in a lot of instances your creativity was pushed down because you were told that don't look good, this don't look good. What you're doing that for? Experimentation is part of creativity, and unfortunately, we are locked into cookie cutter moods of behavior and cookie cutter moods of education. So once you don't fit into that slot, you are then viewed as being difficult, antisocial, uncooperative, unable to work with groups. Have any of y'all ever had reports like that in your time in school, that you are a disruptive element in the classroom because you ask questions?
I'll put my hand up for that part because I used to always ask questions if I don't understand something.
Uh huh.
I am going to ask questions even while on the job that I am on also. Every
Uh
day is
huh.
a learning experience for me because although I'm there a year now, I still have a lot I'm learning.
Oh, that makes
So
sense. The only
my manager should be like, you ask a lot of questions. I'm glad that you do because nobody does. And it's a great thing of your critical thinking that you actually ask instead of just reacting immediately.
right, and but unfortunately, you're the minority.
Yeah, that's correct.
You're the exception rather than the rule, and in critical thinking environments, that needs to be the rule, not the exception. You follow me?
Yeah.
So, and it's something that is drummed out of us systematically as we move on. All right, now there are three basic principles that the model then moves us towards in terms of developing the developmental process of emerging as a leader. It starts with knowing, and we talked about this before. You must know yourself. You must know how change occurs, and you must know why others view things differently than yourself. And that's a critical thing because we need to realize that how we see the world is not the way other people will see things around us. So let's look at this little exercise here. What do you see? Let me ask somebody I haven't spoken to yet. Aleem, you're able to contribute? Mr. Mohammed,
Yes, sir.
what are you seeing on the screen there now?
Uh, s- well, I'm seeing two women, or a woman looking into a mirror with some perfume on her dresser.
Right. What else? Do you see anything else?
There's also a skull. You can
Hmm.
see a skull there.
All right.
The eyes
So,
and the nose.
right. And the items on the thing makes it looks like teeth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Everybody else sees what he's seeing there? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Let's look at this. Mr. Mohammed, you again. What do you see here?
Um, well, the first thing I noticed was a woman with some sort of thing on her head and a feather.
Uh-huh.
I don't see anything else there.
Anybody sees anything else? Are you seeing first off what Aleem is seeing? Is the woman you're seeing, Aleem, a young woman or old woman?
Um, I would say 30s, between
Right.
20s and 30s.
What direction is she looking?
She's looking to the left.
Over her shoulder, right?
Yeah.
So she's looking away from us, so we're seeing the profile of her face. Anybody seeing anything else? Anybody?
An old lady, kind of
Uh-huh.
like how witches are portrayed in storybooks.
Uh-huh. How she she's looking what? Up, down, sideways? What's she doing? She looking down?
She's looking, glaring down at something.
All right. Glaring down at something. Who's this by the way?
Sydney,
Sydney.
Altar.
Are you also seeing the young lady looking away?
Yeah,
All right. Is anybody else besides Sydney seeing? Well, we have two Sydneys here. Is anybody else seeing? Hold on. Let me see who's this coming in. Oh, Miss Williams. Hi, Miss Williams. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, sir.
Hi.
I've
Good
had
off.
some difficulty,
All
but
right.
I'm glad I got it.
Okay, that's good. So today's your first session, right?
Yes, I missed last week's session.
Okay. So there's a recording on this the e-classroom of last week's session. Just to let you know, you've already been assigned to a group for a
Yes,
presentation. All right.
I was
That.
contacted by one of the group members.
Oh, good. Fantastic. That which means you're already in the WhatsApp chat group.
Correct.
All right. Good. So, if you have any other questions, we could tackle it after the class, or I could call you and we could have a chat. All right. If you have any other
Okay,
questions
sir.
about the, all right. Okay. So coming back to
Okay.
this, Olivia, as you're here, what are you seeing on the screen here?
I seen this others may view things differently than you.
No, no. In terms of the pictures, the picture that's here, what do you see?
Oh, the picture that's there. It appears to be a lady's face, her hair, something blowing in the wind,
Uh huh.
like a scarf blowing, from
Right.
her
Yeah.
head.
Okay. So, and she's looking over her shoulder, looking away from us, right?
Yes, her head is tilted to the side. She's looking away.
Right. Okay. Now, somebody said they saw an old lady looking down. Do you see that?
An old lady, no.
Hmm.
Old lady looking down, no.
The person actually identified her as kind of like how witches are portrayed. Right.
Hmm.
So, right, hold on. You may not be the only one. Is everybody seeing the the young lady looking over. Just by a show of hands, show me who sees the young lady looking over her shoulder. Hmm. All right. Wow, the majority of the class. All right. So hands down. How many people sees the old lady looking down? Well, we know Sydney saw her. All right. So a lot of people not seeing the old lady, huh? Good few of you all seeing both faces. There are actually. This is one of these perception um, videos that or images that have more than one image in it. So for those of you who are not seeing the old lady, let's just point out where you might see this older lady. All right. So first thing you want to do is close your eyes for about 5 seconds or so. Now open your eyes and follow what I'm doing here with the my cursor. So the old lady is looking down. This is her chin. This is her mouth. This is her nose. This is one of her eyes. And then we see the eyelashes for her other eye over the nose. This is the front of her hair, which you call the front braid. This is a headscarf. This darkened area here is sort of like a fur coat around her. And this feather is sticking out the top of her head. All right. Everybody seeing that? The chin.
So hold on, hold on.
I
What?
still not seeing.
Where's she chin? Where's she
This
chin and she?
the chin is she's looking down, so her chin is in
Right.
sort of in the folds. This is her mouth. This is her nose. This is one of her eyes, and this is the eyelashes from the other eye poking out of the side of her nose. This is the front of her hair, and she has this scarf over her head. And of course, there's the same feather sticking out. You seeing it now? Who's still not seen the old lady?
So I think
I
I'm
am not.
blind
I
because
am
I'm
not
not
seeing
seeing
an old lady
anything.
at all. I am not seeing an old lady. I am seeing a
There,
young lady.
you seen the young lady?
So
All right. So, in the with the young lady, this is her. This is the side of her chin, right?
her face too,
Right. This
right?
is her
And that's her
ear,
ear deciding,
and this
right?
is her eye, and this is the
That's her
her hair and stuff. Right. Good.
nose.
Now stop and think about it. Close your eyes. Close your eyes. Now look at it. And this is the chin. This is the woman's mouth. This is the nose. Big nose. This is one of her
And imagine
eyes.
I have 4 eyes, literally wear glasses and do not notice that.
Hmm. All right. Well, another thing you could do is like change the angle that you're looking at it from
That's
to try
exactly what I just said. Change the angle. You know,
change the angle and but you have to. You see, it takes an effort. If you easily see the young lady looking over the shoulder, it'll take you a little more to see the older woman looking down. And once you see the two of them, you're never going to have the problem again. You're always going to see the two images. All right, but it takes some practice, and this is the point that I'm trying to make. It is you're going to have to pay attention to how other people see things because not everybody is seeing the old woman and the young woman. They're seeing one, and it has to do a lot with how the image is presenting to themselves. So if we look at this image here, they're both right from where they stand. It's it's the response that they have is correct, but we need to remember that we have to try to see things from the perception of other people in order to appreciate where they see things from. All right. So this is a really nice image here that shows us the importance of that saying, You need to walk a mile in somebody's shoes to really understand their point of view, their life, their perception of things. Because, just where they're standing, that's a 6 or 9. All right? which is right. Based upon everybody's position at this point in time, they're both right. Okay, and that's another possibility that the perception that anybody has is not less credible or less believable simply because you don't see it from their point of view. And a lot of the sorry about that. A lot of the disagreements we have with people around us has a lot to do with differences in perception, huh? Not necessarily an actual physical difference with the items that we're looking at, but simply with differences in perception. This is why we need to understand why other people view things differently than we do, and we have to appreciate that and try first off to understand why they see it that way and not judge them for seeing it that way. The second of the three principles is the being part. You must be ethical, you must be principled, open, caring, and inclusive. And of this list, open, caring, and inclusive is the most important, but also the most challenging, especially when you are dealing with people whose ideas, personalities, and perceptions are diametrically opposed to you and how you feel about things. They tend not to be inclusive. So here we could bring up the whole concept of transphobia or homophobia. If people don't have a negative perception of trans people or homosexual individuals, then can you be open, caring, and inclusive with somebody with whom you have serious issues with in terms of their lifestyle choices? You understand the challenge that we face there? And in leadership, you don't know and you'll never know when you're going to be able to when you're going to be meeting and having to work with individuals of that nature. All right, and that's just a very stark difference in terms of lifestyle selections. But there are other subtle differences that create these barriers that we have with other people. I mean, some are just blatant, because sometimes our inability to care and include other people have to do with how we perceive ethnic values, racism. All right, we have whole groups of societies here in Trinidad who, you know, this whole coolie and nigger thing, this whole concept of race, or the illusion of race, has our society polarized around two different sets of governing principles. Well, is there any principles, but really two sets of or groups of leaders, because some people perceive that other people are against them simply because they are physically different. So these are the kind of things that I'm talking about, and we're going to be blunt with some of the things that we speak about here. And the reason why I'm being blunt is because we have to, as a group, as a population, we have to come to grips with why we think the way we do. Why do we perceive people of Indian origin differently to people who are of African origin? Collectively, as the phrase is, we are all Trinidadians because we were all born here, we all live here, and we have to work together. But there are segments of our society that hold fast against the inclusion of different races, or the inclusion of different people within the activities that each group gets up to. All right. We have lots of individuals outside there who preach against the exclusive nature of some elements of our society, and we have to deal with that. All right. And if you are going to be a leader, where are you going to be if you find yourself in leadership positions and people start to question your loyalty to any group of individuals that they feel you are part of. Because that's another thing. Sometimes we are perceived by others to be, racist, or perceived by others the likeliness to be of one of one ilk as opposed to another. That being part is a challenge in most societies, and our ethical values should override those kind of things. But unfortunately, they don't seem to. You all understand, and I hope you're not offended by my use of language here. But you all understand the issue here that we're talking about. Yes? No? Afraid to
Yes,
say?
sir.
Afraid to say? Now, you remember we talked about this, the perception element that we spoke about before. We said that you need to know yourself, you need to know your values, and you need to understand why other people see things differently. So when we get to this element here, you must be ethical, principled, open, caring, and inclusive. This is one impacting on the other. You need to know if you're racist. Some people don't even know that they have a bias to a particular type of thing. It's sort of like when you look at the type of people you're attracted to. If you really take your time and evaluate all of the individuals in your past that you've always been attracted to, you'd start to see some startling realities about the kind of individuals you're like. You understand what I'm talking about, right? And if you don't even realize that you have a particular biasness towards something or towards some type of individual that you perceive, you're not going to realize it. I mean, and it does take time to actually work out, where you stand when it comes to certain things. So that's an important thing. This is a quotation from Mr. Branston here. Having a personality of caring about people is important. You cannot be a good leader, much less a great leader, if you don't like people. All right? If you don't like people, then how can you encourage them to be better? As I thought this quotation here embodied that caring element that we talked about in the being part. All right? That we talked about. You must be caring and inclusive. All right? The the last or the third part of the principle here is the doing part. You must act in a socially responsible manner, and in doing so, you must be consistent and congruent as a participant in the community on your own commitments and your own passions. So, what does this mean? You have to be socially responsible regardless of where you're operating, home, work, church, on the public streets. And you must be consistent with that behavior. So if you are being forgiving in the classroom, you also have to be forgiving in the home, and you also have to be forgiving in the wider environment. The idea is it needs to be consistent and congruent across all boards, and it has to be consistently the same type of behavior. Again, you can't just be one way in one part of your society or one part of the community and a different way in a different side. That doesn't lend itself to credibility and integrity. All right. So we're going to get into this whole concept in a lot of cases here across the board. So the social responsibility is a phrase or a concept we need to look at in a little more detail. This is the principle that in addition to pursuing profit generations, corporations should try to act in a way that positively affects society and the world. Now, this is something that has come to the forefront a lot in some of the discussions that we've been paying attention to. We have to pay attention to the way in which our society, businesses in particular, do their business. We have to think about it from the perspective of how do I do things? Am I being socially responsible? When I'm driving, am I speeding? Am I being reckless with my driving? That's not socially responsible. When I, eat eat my food and consume drinks, do I just toss my rubbish out into the sidewalks and into the space? A lot of people behave like that, and we kind of um, are we being socially responsible? I mean, how does all that garbage end up on the side of the road? Every morning when I get up, sometimes, especially after a long weekend, the front of my house, there's bottles on the road, in front of my gate, wrappers, boxes of food. That is behavior because of people who are not being socially responsible. Does it mean that I should behave the same way because I'm not seeing behavior around me that's happening the same way? And furthermore, corporations need to behave in the same manner because they can't come and try and get your business, but at the same time, the waste from their production is being pumped into the drains and the rivers around us or into the sea and polluting the environment. You follow what I'm talking about, right? Okay. So leadership, it can't, although we just identified three formative or foundation steps that we talked about, the whole concept of leadership is not a thing that can be done by the numbers situation. It's not just a set of easy things that we can just go one, two, three, and you're a leader. No, it don't work so. Um, Leadership requires first and foremost developing a way of thinking. Your personal philosophy has to be aligned with it. You have to have core values that will help you work with other people. And you need to be able to identify what those core values are. And then when we will start to talk about that, there's a group that will present a chapter on what are core values and that type of stuff when we look at strategic growth and growth and strategic vision and vision and mission statements and stuff like that. All right. This developmental process requires us to kind of shift some of our thinking processes. So the paradigm of hard work. Now, when we talk about a paradigm, we'll understand that in a little more detail. So instead of the paradigm of working harder, we need to work smarter. Now, most of us have heard this from parents and grandparents. You know, you need to work hard at what you want to achieve in life. um, this model is saying, okay, yes, yeah, we have to work hard, but really, what we should do is not only working hard, we should also work smarter. And when the model talks about working harder or smarter, sorry, it's referring to three areas of smartness or intelligence: collectively smarter, reflectively smarter, and spiritually smarter. So collectively smarter is to recognize that all of us are smarter than one of us. And this is a challenge for a lot of people because they're unwilling to accept other people's positions and points of views as collectively giving us a better response to a problem than just what I think or what you think alone. Consider the years of experience that other people can collectively bring towards solving a problem. Collectively, the amount of different expertise, training that comes into a discussion where more of us are involved in finding a solution to a significant problem. Collectively smarter means that we trust that the collective is more intelligent than the individual, and that is true because there's no way any one individual can have as much knowledge or understanding or perception of a problem that is facing us all common. Think of, for example, the issue with crime in Trinidad and Tobago. Um, it it can't be that um, one person has the solutions. We have to find solutions that come from all the stakeholders involved, including the criminals, because they know why they're doing what they're doing. All right? And if we attempt to always find solutions from just one perspective, it will fail because we're not taking into consideration what other things are happening around us. So collectively smarter speaks to us understanding and identifying that we cannot do things alone. And I know in Costa, the amount of group work that you end up having in all of your courses tends to create little challenges for us working together. But this is why, because collectively we are all better off. All right. Now, reflectively smarter means taking time to reflect on what happened in the past to gain perspective and understanding, and using that perspective and understanding to make better decisions down the road in the future. Now, a lot of you all here are in your second, at least your second semester or second year of the program, or second semester of the first year, depending upon where you are. How many of you all um, took the time to reflect on what took place in your previous semester? Or if this is your first semester, have taken time to reflect upon what worked in your previous education circumstances and help to make decisions moving forward. The problem with most of our lives is that we live at the speed of information. And the problem is because we're not taking time to stop and look back, we are losing out on being on using the experience of the past to prevent the same errors from taking place in the future. Consider, for example, in relationships. Some people run from one relationship into another without really thinking clearly about what took place in the last relationship that, probably didn't work, or wasn't useful. And that's an issue we have to face, because in a lot of times, if we were to take time to pay attention to what took place in the past, we could prevent a lot of the issues that are likely to happen in the future. Again, reflectively smarter means that we need to spend some time reflecting on the past to make sure that we understand why we got the outcomes we did, both the good and the bad. We have a tendency to focus only on the bad, but we also have to look at what worked and what was good out of the past. Even the negative things that have happened can be looked upon as teaching us something good out of the experience. All right. Um, the world we operate in, however, doesn't encourage this type of reflective things, because everything's, you know, we have to move as fast as possible and be ready for the next moment. So it doesn't always lend itself to that. Now, spiritually smarter, the third element, doesn't really talk to a belief structure about, God and religion. It's really about understanding your own personal values and making sure that we know what our values are, our true values, not the values that we project to the external environment or the world around us, that we want people to believe about us. If you want to know what somebody really thinks and how they will really behave, what their true values are, look at their behavior or look at your own behavior when things got rough. So the statement here, the true values and principles become our guiding light in rough waters. Meaning, when things go wrong, those basic principles guide our behavior and what we do and how we behave. So if the first thing you do when things go wrong is to hit somebody, that's something that's in your value structure. It's about the dominance of everybody else. If the first thing you do when things go wrong is to lie and tell untruths to protect yourself to the detriment of everybody else is at fault and you are correct, that is your true values. Examine your behavior and understand, if you don't like what you've been doing, there's room for you to change. And we need to understand that that value that you, or belief that you've had in the past of getting your own way, of lying and telling falsehoods to be able to get your to look like you've done the best thing. All right, those are the true values that you are projecting to the world around you. All right, and despite what you might try to do to prevent other people from seeing that, eventually that will become very apparent to those of us around you, or around those people around yourself, who will eventually be able to see that that's the nature of who you are. Okay, it doesn't hide itself, but be aware of it. Awareness of self-awareness is going to be one of the critical elements. What are your basic value structures? That's going to be something that you want to look at. Another element we have to look at is shifting paradigms. Now, what is a paradigm? I said we will talk about this in a little bit. Paradigms is the way in which society and we tend to look at things to be able to make sense of it. And society has a particular types of paradigms that they talk about. Leadership paradigms are methods of looking at how leadership emerges and how things run and how things work. Um, I wouldn't bother with this question here at this point because what I want us to look at is when things are going wrong, it means that whatever we are doing is not working. So it requires that we change things. That's what leads to what is referred to as a paradigm shift. All right. What shifts have you seen in your lifetime so far? A paradigm means a shift from previously held patterns of behavior and activities and belief structures that are no longer relevant in today's environment. What are some examples of paradigm shifting that you might have experienced in the past? Well, a paradigm shift. Leadership is not something a leader possesses so much as a process that involves followership. That's a paradigm shift. All right? Because for the vast majority of people, leadership has to do about what the leader does. But leaders can't do anything, to be honest with you. If nobody follows you, you can't lead. If you think about it, you can't do anything in any society if people don't support you. So the only way that you can really start to think about leaders and leadership is what is the quality of your followership? Do you have the support of people around you who are willing to walk that journey with you? To well, not walk, just go in that direction with you. So if we stop thinking about leadership from the leader's perspective only, and we start to think about leadership as something that is the experience with those around him, then what we should be focusing on to a great extent is followership. Followership is really leadership in action among people in groups. Leaders can't do anything, as I said before, without the impact or the influence of the followership around them. Now, what are the kind of follower types that we are likely to encounter? Think about you in a group. Are you a politician, partner, subordinate, or contributor? Well, on the axis here, or the matrices that we're looking at here, you'd see on the y-axis, we're looking at the relational initiatives of the individual, and on the x-axis, we're looking at the performance initiative of the individual. That's down here. So where the performance is high and the relational initiative is high, you have something called a partner. That's the nature of that type of follower. Now, partners are really good workers within a group dynamic or organization. The problem with partners, however, is that they're just as likely to be able to challenge a leader for their leadership roles. So a lot of leaders try to make sure that they limit and control what partners do. Similarly, you have somebody who is high on performance but low on relationship. That's a contributor. That's somebody who does a lot of work, but they're not good with the communication element, the connectivity element with the people around them. All right? These tend to be the hardworking individuals in organizations that do all the grunt work performance wise, and they the wind beneath your wing kind of thing. They're the people who support the leaders' actions and success. As opposed to that, you have somebody who is low on both relationship and performance. That's a subordinate. That's somebody who needs constant supervision and driving and encouragement to get anything done, whether it's in the relationship area or the performance area. They're just kind of they. so to speak. Now, another type of individual that you might find in and around or in your group is somebody who's really poor with performance, similar to the subordinate, but they're really good with the communication elements. They're like the politician. Now, this is not my table. This is a table taken from the text developed by Potter and Company. The politician is really glib. They're good with the communication. They're good with the the networking and all that kind of stuff, but they're really bad of actually getting work done. So these are the types of people or follower types that this model tells us. So the idea would be, as a leader, if you know where these people fall, then you're able to utilize them constructively. So um, you put politicians together with contributors. That way, you these people actually get the work done, and the politician will be able to sell and connect with the other people and get the communication elements dealt with. And you put partners together with subordinates because a partner is high in both areas, but they will help to drive the subordinates along the way. Now, I like to think about this in the context of group work. Which are you? I mean, everybody would like to be a partner, but honestly, in every group activity that you're probably involved with, sometimes you can't be. Sometimes just the circumstance or the situation doesn't lend itself, or your personality doesn't lend itself. A lot of people tend to be good contributors. They're able to perform well, but they don't like the presentation parts. A lot of you all have that type of. I think some people talked about that as some of the expectations that they're likely to deal with in terms of this class is to actually deal with their communication ability in the long run. Things to consider. Another set of follower types. This is from the Hyacinth model. You have loyalists, sycophants, critics, opportunists, spectators, traitors, and realists. Again, this is more from a political standpoint or in terms of looking at the different types of follower types. Leaders evaluate the people around them, can in fact lump them into particular categories, and therefore they will know what strategies they need to utilize to be able to get the most out of these individuals or the people that they have to pay a lot more attention to. All right. So this is just a method of evaluating things, this model here. So if you know you have a whole set of people who are loyalists, those are the people who are going to support you, work with you, help you productively get things done. Loyalists have a tendency, however, to need realists around them because loyalists are always going to be faithful and optimistic, but realists are going to be the ones who could really be more critical. Same thing, realists and critics are useful to a leader to be able to guide some of their behaviors and actions and tune things down. Spectators are people who are just hanging back and looking. Sometimes you might need some loyalists to go in there and start to activate some of those people. Opportunists are people that you need to guard against, similar to sycophants, because they're only there when things are good and they're going to hop out when things are bad. Sycophants are only there for what they could get. You be careful of that. And of course, you need to be wary of traitors because they're just selling you out. So, again, in a political environment, these are the kind of follower types you're likely to come across. Kelsey also has a different system, and we'll meet this one in another presentation that I'll do in chapter 3. The alienated follower, the effective follower, the conformist, or the passive follower. So what we're looking at here is on the X and Y axis, and this is more of a more infinite type. You have the center, which is the survivor or pragmatist. You have on the X-axis, you're measuring um, your behavior, passive behavior or active behavior. And on the y-axis, you're measuring the degree of critical and independent thinking. So obviously, people down on this corner here tend to be more dependent and uncritical thinkers. Those would be passive. So those who are also passive in their behavior, they are more passive followers. They're not going to do anything. They're not going to think anything. So they are, they're just there. You have highly active people, conformists. This is like sheep. So they will do everything you tell them, but they're not going to question what you're going to do. Then you have the other side here. You have the effective follower who is highly critical thinking and high active behavior. That person is going to be very active in getting things done. They're going to be critical thinking. They will question why you're doing things, and once they agree or with the direction that you want to take, and they are happy with it, critical thinkers will still question you, but they will be effective followers. Alienated followers are critical thinkers who no longer engage. And a lot of people in the electorate in Trinidad and Tobago have gone into this area of alienated followers because they've looked at all the parties that have offered themselves up and have performed in the past, and it's sort of like six of one and half a dozen of another. There's no difference between any party. It doesn't make a difference who's in power. The same things apply, and that is unfortunate because um, it tends to lead to a sort of apathy in the society, that they no longer feel as if their voice is heard, and they resign themselves to the problems that we are faced with, and just simply just sit back and say, well, how it hang it swing, I don't care anymore, and they sort of disconnect from society around them, and unfortunately a lot of people are following into that area. Now, followers have some responsibilities, and we want to look at them. They obviously have to offer support to the leader to get things done. They should be able to take initiative. They should be taking counseling and coaching rules for both other followers as well as the leader themselves, because you have to consider the leader is not going to know everything at all times, and therefore sometimes the leader needs people to help him, to counsel and teach them, especially when they're unable to see in themselves the issues that they have. They ought to be able to raise issues and concerns with the leader and others when necessary, so you don't get a lot of sheep behavior. Seek and encourage honest feedback. That's an important one, because leaders need to know when they're doing rubbish and when they're doing good. That honest feedback is going to be critical. Clarify the role of the follower and the expectations. So you need to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. Um, you show appreciation both to the leader and the other followers around you. That's an important element. Keep the leader informed so that the leader can make proper decisions, because if they make decisions without all the necessary information, the decision will be probably a less quality type decision, poorly informed decision. And they must also be able to resist the influence of the leader, inappropriate influences. So not because a leader gets himself tied up in some sort of negative type of activity, followers follow just without question. So this here brings up the critical thinking element and the ability to act independently. So that if a leader does something that is negative, they can call them up and bring them to bear on it. A lot of leaders do not encourage this because they don't like their behaviors to be questioned. In fact, they ridicule people, and well, we should see some of that happening soon in the States. All right. Competencies of followers: displaying loyalty, function well in change-oriented environment, functions on well on teams, thinks independently and critically, considers integrity of the most paramount importance. So these are some of the competencies that the followership needs to have. So is that phrase follower the best way to call these people? Think of what are some of the other terms that you might utilize really to talk about people who fall into this followership area? Can you think of any? I can think of the word associate. Instead of referring to them as followers, I can say associates, team members. Can you think of anything else? Anybody? No? All right. Let's look at leadership styles. We spoke about the need in the past of utilizing different leadership styles based upon the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Now we're going to go through some of this in more detail, but you have the classical approaches, I should say, laissez-faire, autocratic, participative. Those are the basic situations that you're going to come across in leadership textbooks. Laissez-faire meaning that you just leave things alone, how it goes, it swings. Autocratic means my way or the highway. Participative means that you engage in consultation with other people and you make a decision based upon the recommendations of everybody or the input of everybody. Not necessarily something that can happen all the time, though. Situational would be whatever the situation is, your leadership will emerge at that point in time, or your decision making will open based upon the circumstances. Emergent is leaders that emerge out of an organization based upon years of working in the organization. They emerge out of the morass of people around them. Transactional is a type of leadership where you are engaging in leadership decision making utilizing transactional approaches to getting things done. So if you do this, you get this done. It's transactional, something that parents use a lot with children. Um, if you do your homework, you'll get to watch TV. If you do this, and it's both negative and positive, right? If you don't do your homework, then you're not going to get to watch TV, or you're not going to get to use your um, movies or something along those lines. You know, transformational is different in the sense that transformational leadership is a system in which leaders inspire people to want to change. So they have a goal or objective in mind, and instead of using transactional methodologies to get things done, they utilize inspiration and inspire people towards making that transformation. Again, this has something to do with the elements of internal motivation to try and get people to do things that the organization wants to be done. And of course, then we have the visionary leaders paint pictures of the future to which they embody people and encourage people similar in transformational to want to achieve that vision and goal. So there are different people that we could look at in terms of that. So who's the leader then? A leader is any person, according to the model, who actively engages with others to accomplish change. So a leader is not somebody who works on their own. Notice that. Lots of people here like to think that they're being mavericks and they're being leaders by doing things on their own. But this is not what the model that we're looking at determines as leaders to be. They are people who work actively with others to get some change. All right. What is the purpose of leadership? To motivate employees or motivate members, attain the goals of the organization, be it social or business, ensure that the rules that govern are adhered to. All right, so the rules are followed by everybody, including the leader. Provide continuity in the objectives and momentum. So if things are slowing down, they need to go and say, hey, we need to pick things up and help to continue the movement towards the objectives that you have in the future. Embrace and foster change, because you can't want things to change and expect other people to have to change. It doesn't work that way. You have to embrace the change to be able to foster that change going forward and encouraging others to do. You're going to do things for the common good of everybody. You're going to behave in a socially responsible manner. You're going to engage with the civil society around you, or the civil. You're going to be civilly engaged with the society around you, and you're going to behave in a civil, responsibly manner. So, social responsibility. We spoke about this already. A personal commitment, but this is from the individual perspective here. A personal commitment to the well-being of people, the world, and the public good. So, whatever we are doing in our day-to-day life, in all of our activities, we are ensuring that whatever we do is to the benefit of everybody, and that not only in your own country but around the world, and whatever we're doing is for the public good. Civic engagement means we have a heightened sense of responsibility for all of the communities we are involved with. our work community, our social community, our families, and the physical community or your neighborhood that you're living in. Some of the actions that you could get engaged into: civil actions or civic engagement, volunteering. And any of you all do this, by the way? Volunteer in any sort of services or organizations in your community? Anybody here a member of like the Leo Club, the Rotaries, the all these different clubs outside there? Maybe a church group, a youth group, anything like that? And you all have time for these things? Hmm.
No. The only thing I am in is actually Steel Pan to Panorama, and that's only like once a year it comes out.
All right. Okay. So you'd realize that it's not there are lots of things that could be going on that is not happening, and civil engagement is one of those things that we're looking at. Willingness to make positive contributions to your society, um, or the ability to be involved in society, in the political environment as well. Some people, have that kind of sense of activity. Civil responsibility, a sense of personal responsibility individuals should feel to uphold their obligation as part of any community. So things like, if you get called for jury duty, going to school, obeying the laws, paying taxes, those are things that you need to get to do on a regular basis. Actions that you can do, again, community service, voting, serving in the military if required, displaying patriotism. That's something in Trinidad that we often suffer from. We kind of like bandwagonists, we're patriotic to a point, um, but generally we don't tend to be, we always skirt the law. Not We don't necessarily want to go to school. Forget about jury duty, and a lot of people try to avoid paying taxes, especially those people who make the most amount of income. They tend to want to not pay any. So, question: should a leader know everything? Well, to move us along, no. There's an expectation, however, that some people still have in today's environment, that leaders should know everything, and that's not true. It's not even physically possible or mentally possible. If a leader doesn't know everything, then a leader needs to be open to learning about the things they don't know. And we have to remember, all of us are smarter than one of us. Okay. So if we take that in relation with what we're doing, it means that leaders and organizations have to engage in lifelong learning. All right. The whole group, including the leader, needs to make sure that the environment in which they're operating is open to learning, making mistakes, and sharing knowledge. Lots of leaders hide the fact that they don't know because they think it diminishes their power, and therefore don't create an environment or assist in creating environments of learning in the organization. They do not tolerate errors, all right, which is part of the learning process. So if you think about some of the approaches that we've had in the past, the minute you make one error, that's it. You lost your job, you get kicked out, that kind of stuff. And more importantly, sharing knowledge is something a lot of leaders don't do because they perceive the holding on to the knowledge as being able to hold on to power. This leadership model is the opposite. It's saying that the leader will not know everything and therefore needs to create an environment in which everybody, including the leader, is open to learning new things. Learning by doing leads to making mistakes and therefore learning from those mistakes and sharing that knowledge so that everybody is uplifted and not just one person or one group over other groups, but the entire group is thing. This is a learning model that we could look at from the text itself. And to be able to do anything, we have to have our capacity, our willingness, and our focus all working together to be able to get that done. So, little kind of learning model that we could look at here. This is one you might be a little more familiar with. It's based upon the scientific method in that you start by conceptualizing a concept, you apply it, whatever happens, you gain from the experience, you reflect upon what took place, and you either go back and try and make some sort of change, that's critical inquiry, reconceptualize, go through that process again, and those processes then eventually lead to an accepted um, form of thinking, which we refer to as theory, which is then posted into the regular thought process outside of yourself, which then joins the applications in the real world. All right, so it's sort of like how concepts, how ideas become theories. So it's the hypothesis hypothesis testing model, not hypotheses, hypothesis hypothesis testing. Okay, now there's a whole scientific process involved with this thing, but the whole thing about it is that it requires a process of try, retry, experience, reflect, think about, and we go through this cycle here a few times before something becomes part of accepted and existing theory, which is then applied to the real world around us. Um, some of the most effective organizations are really learning environments. And these environments engage in learning all the time. So if we think about COSTAT, for example, COSTAT, part of its mandate is to create lifelong learners by being lifelong learners. So when you leave here, when you graduate, it's not meant that you should stop learning, but we would have placed with you the ability to continuously upgrade and continue learning every day of your life. All right, especially when it comes to your disciplines and stuff like that. All right. The only way to stay relevant in this environment, in the world around us, is to continuously continue learning about these things around you. If we ever stop learning, I mean, that's it, you're dead, kind of thing like that. One other form of learning that is really important is learning through experience or experiential learning. We come to a lot of the understanding of things through our experience with it, and sometimes through just thinking about it, abstract conceptualization. So there are two ways in which we can arrive at new learning, either through experience or through thought. Now, when we process the information that we've reflected on or we thought about, we need to put that into practice and then think about what we've done again. All right. So this model here is where it's going to talk. You can either start with concrete experiences, reflect on it, reconceptualize something, and try it again and see what happens from the concrete experience and continue going like this. Or you can start from just thinking about it, trying it out from the concrete experience, then reflecting. So experiential learning has 2 points of start or 2 possible points of starting. Either the experience drives the thought process, or the thought process drives to a concrete experience, which then leads to further reflection. Now, unfortunately, this model just goes in a circle, but really what this is, it's a spiral, and it spirals outwards, because every time we do something and then think about it and come back, we should be spiraling out, because our understanding of the concept or the idea that we're working on should be improving. All right, so it means that the ideal thing is that we are spiraling outwards. Sometimes, however, we make mistakes or we do things and we spiral back inwards. So again, as long as we don't stop, then we continue going in that direction. So to kind of wrap things together, this quotation from the text itself: leadership is a role open to anybody. Leadership is living by a personal set of rules in which you motivate others to do the right thing, be engaged in the world, and to listen to others and their concerns. Leadership is focused on the other person. And I chose this out of the text because I felt that it best displayed what the model of leadership is pushing us towards. And we're going to look at this model in a lot of detail over the next couple of, well, the next chapter, we're going to look at the development of leadership theory. And then in the third chapter, we're going to look at the relational leadership model in a lot more detail. So I like this picture with the penguins. If you all remember the March of the Penguins, leadership is not the privilege of the few. You and I can and should be leaders. So I want to encourage us to begin this journey of leadership over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll be able to, you know, come to some really good understanding of what's been going on and some appreciation of the work that we're going to be doing. All right, so want to ask some questions here, or ask generally if anybody has any questions they would like to ask. Everybody thinks they followed everything. Now, a copy of that presentation is on the e-classroom, so you can look at it if you so desire. Um, if you have any questions, you could post it into the WhatsApp chat. But if not, I mean, I think we've had a fairly good session. Everybody thinks they followed everything. They understood everything, basically. Of course, you can go and read the chapter.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah. All right. No worries. Okay. All right. Good to go. All right. So let's stop the recording.